A few months back, we talked about the reported news that there was not going to be an Assassin's Creed 1 remake, at least now, and a lot of people asked why. Why not? I kind of argued that maybe it doesn't completely need one. Maybe Ubisoft would just mess it up, which I think a lot of people agreed with the possibility of. But now, we're looking at Assassin's Creed 4 possibly getting remade. I'm actually kind of hoping this isn't true, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, but it really is sounding like it possibly is true because the sources around it are pretty valid. But before we hop into it, if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. We are getting close to 120,000 subscribers, which is very awesome. I appreciate you all very much, and I hope you will join us along on the ride. Now, it's worth noting that Assassin's Creed has had a lot of games, something that they actually poked fun at in the original article talking about this on Kotaku, and I saw some articles in other places poking fun at as well. I get it that this is kind of the one known as the pirate game. This is not actually the fourth game. I know it has the number 4 on it, but if we're just looking at mainline titles, this is pretty much the 6th game. Then there's a lot of mobile stuff, handheld, etc. But what's weird about this is that this is not at all the beginning of the series. If they are actually going to remake this game, it's a little bit of an odd place to start. Now, according to 2 sources familiar with the plans to remake Assassin's Creed 4, who asked to not be named according to Kotaku because they were not authorized to discuss them, which is pretty much how all of these reports work, a remake of the 2013 cross-gen PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 game is in the earliest stages and will not be complete for a few years. A team at Ubisoft Singapore, one of the studios that has led development on the AC franchise's evolving ocean tech, will be heavily involved in helping to modernize the Caribbean-based sailing game. And then Ubisoft declined to comment. And after that, basically, Kotaku goes on to talk a little bit about it and speculate about it, and I wanted to talk about the idea of this game actually being remade, because to me it's not that interesting. It doesn't really seem like we need it. And actually, a lot of people were making fun of it online. I saw one tweet with 55,000 likes, which is kind of staggering to me, basically making fun of how gaming has to remake the same games over and over again, along with yearly titles and all this other stuff. And honestly, to some degree, I kind of agree with them. I know it's become very common to remaster and remake things, put them in collections, things like that. And for the preservation of games, at least remasters and collections, I'm all for. I love those things. The fact that we are very soon getting the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection and people on modern hardware are going to be able to play some of my favorite games, that makes me really happy. But when you remake games, you have very large shoes to fill, and sometimes it's not really worth pursuing, or you have to think about where you start. For example, Resident Evil has been remaking a lot of their franchise, but they sort of started at the beginning. There are spin-offs that they could do as well, but they started with what aged the worst. And some people are going to get mad at that statement. Look, as somebody who literally will go back and play 30-year-old games or more, I'm not saying that makes those games bad. I know this is not about Resident Evil, but my point is that Capcom went back to old games that they saw that a lot of modern audiences would not bother playing. Whether you and I agree with that or not, they would not bother picking up a game with these set camera angles, these potato-looking graphics, put it in an old console or emulate it on their computer. They wouldn't bother with it. So what did they decide to do? They decided to essentially reimagine or recreate the atmosphere, the story, and some other stuff of that, and change things and make it again. Now that's something that I think works when you're going back far enough with games, or if games have major problems, like Demon's Souls. Demon's Souls had a lot of issues on the PS3. The thing runs like crap, and I love that game, even the original, but it runs very, very poorly. And so what did they actually decide to do? Well, they got Bluepoint to actually go back, fix that game up, make it again, and re-release it on the PS5, and it's a fantastic exclusive game. It's a fantastic entry in the Soulsborne series. Now, the main reason I wanted to talk about all of this today is because I don't think this game needs a remake, and I'm interested in what you think about it. I'm going to kind of present my case here, but again, in the comments down below, if you want to tell me what you think, I'm interested. So first off, I think this game already aged very well. It has some graphical issues once in a while and some glitches, but overall nothing glaring that's much worse than other games in the franchise. There are a lot of different cosmetics in this game. There are tons of different islands in the West Indies to actually explore, tons of side missions, a not super long, but long enough main story, there are a few things that I would actually say this game could have done better, that if a remake is going to do, I would want to see. Some of those things would be an expanded story. I feel like certain characters like Adewale or even Anne Bonny actually got the short end of the stick in this game, and you didn't actually get to see enough of them. Even characters like Blackbeard, it would have been nice to see a couple more missions alongside in order to really build up the relationship with Edward. And I also think that there are some islands that there's very little reason to visit. Most of them are totally fine, and honestly, this is one of my favorite games in the entire franchise, so I don't really have that many complaints with it. But if you were to remake it, there is some opportunities to flesh out the story a little bit, and also to get into some of the mechanics that had some issues. I think the climbing on the engine of Assassin's Creed 3 and 4 especially had some issues. It doesn't always work the way that it should. So there are things there that I think you could improve, but do those things justify an entire remake? I think that depends on one thing. Are you actually going to improve all those things? Are you going to improve the climbing? Are you going to improve the story? Are you going to improve the ship battles and make them even more dynamic? Are you going to add more customization? Because that's what you need to do if you're going to make a remake of this game. This is not Demon's Souls. This is not a game that was perfectly fine at its DNA, but just revamping the mechanics makes it, amazing. This is a game that was already done very well, and if you're going to bother remaking it, you better have a good reason to do so other than just, as Mr. Krabs would say, I like money. My final thing I would be interested in seeing in a remake is actually some of the cut content. Now, I was reading some interviews with different directors and people who worked on this game, and something interesting I thought was some of the content around Mary Read and Anne Bonny that was cut from the game I think actually would have helped the third act of the story quite a bit, because there was a lot more implied with the relationship between the two of them, and you were actually going to get to see them fighting the Navy and doing some stuff together instead of just popping up again later in the story to disappear yet again, or I guess take on a minor role. So there are some characters that, because this game had to juggle so many, ended up getting some of their content cut, and I think that does kind of suck. It's not really something that's so glaringly obvious and bad with the game that it's like, oh, this makes the game bad. It's just something that, again, if you're going to bother going back and messing with this, because let's be honest, when you do remake a game, you are running the risk of kind of tarnishing its legacy by either just making a cash in or making it bad. So if you are going to go back and mess with these things, I think you have to improve them. Improve the graphics, that's the one that we know would be, but also actually improve the climbing, improve the combat a little bit, add back in that cut story content that was supposed to be in the game. This is something that remakes miss all the time. For some reason, when we get remakes, a lot of the times they don't add in the cut content that would have made the game better. Personally, I think it's because of laziness. Usually the people making them say it's to preserve the original vision, but if you're trying to preserve the original vision, just don't remake the game. I mean, it's as simple as that. The original vision is already there. But if you want to add to the original vision, and I don't mean in a bad way, a revisionist history way, but I mean in a positive way that adds more content and makes the experience better, I'm open to that. But this would have to be that for me to be really open to this. Now, let's be honest, I'll probably play it anyway because I really like the Assassin's Creed games. But my point is, if you're going to revisit something from the past, I really think you got to make sure that you do it as good or better. And if it's just as good, there's not really a point, is there? If it's worse, there's definitely not a point. So that's why you should strive to do better. I also do want to say in a side note here, for me, it's a little bit of a bad look to pick this game as the first one to remake if you're doing so. Assassin's Creed 1 was left behind generations ago on consoles, especially for PlayStation. PlayStation does not have very good preservation of their past games. Now, I say that as someone sitting next to a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox Series X. I'm not picking sides here in the little plastic box war the 12-year-olds fight. What I'm saying is that when it comes to Xbox, you can, bash it all you want, but something they have going for them is enhanced games and older games still running on modern infrastructure very well. Take a look at Assassin's Creed 1, and this is going to kind of prove my point. Assassin's Creed 1 is pretty much stuck on the PS3. That's where it's at. I mean, if you want to play any version of Assassin's Creed 1 on PlayStation anything, it's the PS3 version. That's what you get access to. But Assassin's Creed 1 on the Xbox One X and the Xbox Series consoles, it has a 4K patch. It's running better than it did at launch. It looks fantastic. It's crystal clear. It was enhanced for free to run better on modern infrastructure because that's something that Xbox has had going for them that they've been able to tout as a selling point for quite a while. Look how we value old games. And that's what's weird about this game, is if you actually look into the games that got enhancements, they were pretty much all free. Yes, there were some remasters along the way, but even those, a lot of them got FPS boosts and other enhancements over time. Things like, Assassin's Creed, the Ezio Collection, things like Rogue Remastered or 3 Remastered getting FPS boost for free, where it actually ran in 60 FPS. But look at Assassin's Creed 4. It didn't get that. That's kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, if they were going to add all of these different ways to preserve and make the original games better, but one of the only ones they didn't do that for free is now one that they might be remaking from the ground. Oh, do you see what I'm saying? Do you see my point here? It's weird how this was the one game they neglected to actually make better, because if they were to future-proof it, you wouldn't have a reason to buy a remake. I think that's a little nefarious. That's not really a great way to... I mean, it's probably good from a money standpoint, but it's not really a great way to value your games and to actually preserve them for the future. And before someone says, well, it's Xbox, it's Microsoft, they're the ones who always enhance every game, they do that kind of thing with the permission and the cooperation generally of the people who made it. And by people, I mean studio or publisher. They don't just go back and enhance games and say, haha, here's the middle finger. We made your old game backwards compatible and we fixed it up. Too bad for you. And why don't they do that? Well, because they can't do that with every game. We see that with old Spider-Man games. It's not like they can just go back and mess with licenses and things they don't own. They just can't do that. There's legalities to it. But what they can do is go back, work with publishers, say, hey, we want to make this game run better. We want to make this actually a selling point for our console. Look, here you can play Assassin's Creed games in 60 FPS. You can't do that on PlayStation. So it comes off as a weird look to me that a ton of their games got that treatment for free, or they got remasters, games that didn't even maybe hold up as well as this. Like, I love Assassin's Creed 3. That game has a lot of bugs, and a lot of story problems, despite being one of my favorite in the franchise. I would say overall, 4 probably holds up better as a game than AC3 does. But 3 isn't getting a remake, is it? 4 is. Because they know of the popularity of 4. But I really think it comes back to the fact that if they were to future-proof this game that they wanted to remake, it wouldn't have been a good business decision because it would have steered people away from trying the remake. Imagine you made the old version of the game amazing and as good as possible. You went back, you fixed a ton of the glitches, you made it run smooth like butter and look crystal clear. Well, now you announce a remake, and this game has aged even better than it did already. And it aged really well already without any of that stuff, without a remaster, without graphical patches or anything like that. It already aged well. So you don't want to future-proof that thing because it would possibly eat into your sales of your remake. That's not a good look. It's not a good look to be fixing up every title you don't plan to remake right now, but then not fixing up the one that all of a sudden is getting a remake. That's weird and not really consumer friendly. So not only do I think that this game aged well, like I've already probably said a dozen times, but I also think it's weird to start here, both from the perspective of having old games stuck on past infrastructure, and also it's weird to start here because of the look of not improving this game for all these years and ignoring it just to bring it back all of a sudden because it's a moneymaker. Now, at the end of the day, Ubisoft is a business. Of course, they value money, and of course that is, the king to them. That's just how it works. But I do also think that you want to balance consumer experience with those things, and I don't really know if starting with this game is the way to do it when there are other games that could use it more. I'm actually shocked that some of the handheld games that had actual stories to them have been completely ignored for remakes that could from the ground up be really interesting. Things like Assassin's Creed Liberation that had a lot of unique mechanics that we don't really see again. Or even the Assassin's Creed DS games. Yes, those did exist. There was one for Altair with the Altair Chronicles. There was also Assassin's Creed Discovery for Ezio. Those are full stories that could have been really fleshed out and added to, that could have added to some of their most popular assassins of all time and actually made a full 3D remake probably justifiable because it's been lost to time on an old handheld, and other than emulation or people like me who are weirdos who still own all these old consoles, they're not going to be playing those games. But why did they start with 4? Because it was something that they strategically ignored, in my opinion, in order to not make it future-proof, and also because it made a lot of money. It's not about making the old games accessible to you, it's about recycling and regurgitating ideas that they know make money until they don't anymore. It's a little ironic because the meta narrative of Assassin's Creed 4 in the real world is very much about this at Abstergo Entertainment. So it's interesting that Ubisoft was parodying themselves at the time and parodying the game industry, but has become more and more like the real world characters in their games. But that's just kind of how it works. I mean, Rockstar is probably the biggest example of becoming what you hate or make fun of as well. So that's just where we're at. Now, at the end of the day, like I said, if this is good, I want to play it. I'm not saying that it will for sure be bad or that it's a fool's errand and there's no reason to touch it. I'm just saying this is why I don't think it's a great place to start and why I think it's a little bit of a weird look to choose this one after all their decisions. I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below. Personally, I would have preferred a sequel to this game or maybe one of the handheld games to get remade or something like that, actually add on to the story of some of their most iconic characters, or even go into what happens with Edward after the events of this game, like they're doing in the webtoon stories right now. But instead, we might be getting a remake. So let me know what you think down there. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. We also do have a Let's Play channel, Degenerate Plays, where we play through games podcast style, hanging out, having discussions, and enjoying the game. So currently we are actually playing through Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Previously we played through Assassin's Creed 2. So if you're interested in that channel, the link is down below to Degenerate Plays in the description. Also, we do have our own business run by my wife, which is Enchanted Glamour. This is actually a place that sells handmade jewelry, which is really high quality, and also really neat resin pieces from repurposed comic books that were going to get thrown in the trash, actually, and they have been recycled instead of ending up in a landfill. So this stuff is really cool. Every purchase goes to help support our channel, or Jill's channel over at Magical Jill, which I'm also on all the time. So I hope you'll check those things out and join us on our journey. Have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shui.